This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Gubba Homestead. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned all about homesteading. What is it like to start a homestead, to run it, maintain it through the seasons? What is it like having your own dairy cow that you milk for fresh raw milk every day? 6 gallons of fresh raw milk every day. What is it like to have beehives, chickens, to really reconnect with your food system and tap into ancestral preservation methods? How do you make eggs last through the winter? We talk about all that. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed it. We discuss Gubba's vision for the future of her homestead, how she will be cultivating love for the land, for self-sufficiency, and planting fruit trees for future generations. Gubba's passion for all this really shines through in the conversation and is infectious. Just so you're warned, you'll probably want to go start your own homestead after listening to this, just so you're aware. This episode of Peak Earth is brought to you by bumblebees. Bees are majestic beings. They are everywhere. And if you are afraid of them, they're more likely to sting you. If you send them loving vibrations, if you're able to think about how cool they are, how amazing bees are, then they're more likely to be your friend. As you learn in this conversation, bees are awesome. They don't like pesticides. They don't like fear. They do like flowers. So bring some flowers to some bees, plant some flowers, do everything you can to limit and eliminate pesticides and fear. And yeah, that's it. There's really no promo code for this one. That's the sponsor, bees. Go love some bees. Do what you can to send loving vibrations out to some sweet bees. And that's it. Appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy this episode with Gubba. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Really excited to have this conversation with you. I'm glad that you are joining me. I've been really fascinated by everything that you're sharing online about the homestead that you're creating. It's very interesting.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Twitter's been a really cool realm to meet a lot of people.
I guess the obvious first question I think would be, how did you get out there? How did you get started with homesteading?
So I was living in the city and the pandemic thing happened right in 2020. And I just sort of looked around at these empty grocery stores and realized how people normally live their life isn't really sustainable, right? So that kind of kicked me into okay, how can I be self-sufficient? And so then I started sourcing food local where I was at. I started drinking the raw milk, finding my raw milk. And so it just sort of snowballed, this homesteading thing, and starting my seeds and growing a garden, having this small little box garden of where I was. So that's kind of what kicked me off. I was always interested and kind of did a little bit here and there. But then 2020 rolled around and I was like, I got to change everything.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had that experience, but not everyone had the courage to act on it, or at least the motivation to see it all the way through. And I'm sure that I've just by hearing people talk about like, oh, I want to get land, I want to start homesteading. Like it's this a popular sort of idea. What sort of gave you that extra motivation or the courage to really go for it?
I feel like what you just said, I feel like homesteading's becoming so much more popular too with just with the way things are going. People are saying like our systems aren't reliable, but the courage was, well, I wanted to do it, and that was all the courage I needed. I was like, okay, I need to go and get some land, and it seems impossible, but I feel like opportunities are out there. I actually had a comment today from somebody on Instagram, and they were like, hey, I want to know how you did this. How did you get your land? Because I feel like soil's bad and there's no opportunities. And I replied and said, it was really like a miracle of God for me, but I was open to opportunities and just looking. Like you just have to look and things will pop up. And I'm definitely the type of person who thinks like things work out and there's opportunities that present themselves. You just have to be looking. So I kind of just went for it.
It's awesome. And I encourage anyone listening to connect with you online. You have an amazing YouTube channel that shows everything that you're doing. And a few examples would be the chickens that you're tending to, the cow moo that you had for a while, and the
Mhm.
bees, the beehive that you're tending. Just among the gardening that you're doing, there's a lot of beautiful, vibrant nature and sort of food that they're cultivating on your own. How did you get to that point? It seems like you've got this vibrant homestead. It seems like you've been there for just a fairly short amount of time.
Hey, okay, so I feel like I don't know if you can relate to this, but you find a new hobby and then you're just like gun ho into it. Like I gotta have everything. So that's kind of what I did with homesteading. So I moved out to the homestead and I was like, all right, chickens, cows, bees, garden, everything. And that's what I did. What did I do first? I got the chickens and then I got moo because I really wanted a milk cow for the raw milk, right? To experience it. And I wanted bees because bees are great for pollination and they make honey, which goes into my food storage. Honey lasts forever. So, and then a garden. So I just kind of went all like head first in. And it was a lot for my first year. And it was good though, because it helped me realize what I loved and what I didn't love. I love my chickens. I love my bees. I loved my cow. I loved moo. It was just a lot. And so I also do the homestead, but I also stream on Twitch TV, which I don't think a lot of people know. So with having a cow who then had twins, it was a huge time commitment. And so I was spread thin. And so it just helped me see where I can manage my time and resources because I have so many sources for raw milk around here. So that wasn't a big deal. Like I needed a milk cow for raw milk. So that's kind of what I did. Went in head first and realized what worked for me and didn't.
It is funny. You said you mentioned in a video that you made that you had to give moo away because there was just too much milk.
Oh yeah, that too. So if I ever get a cow again, I will have to assess how much milk that they do. So for me, she was given like up to 6 gallons a day. She was a huge producer, huge, and which is absolutely amazing. But I didn't want to sell the milk. I was just giving away milk to my neighbors and friends, and so she was not suitable for me and where I'm at. But she went to this amazing family, and they have like this little community and it made my heart so happy. I don't know if I mentioned it in the video, but they messaged me and they're like, she is the perfect cow for us. And that made me so happy because they had the mouths to feed for all of Moo's milk. I was drowning in milk. It was so much.
That's beautiful, and it was really cool because there was I think maybe this was another video, but you showed the process of bringing moo into the stanchion that I'm pretty sure you built yourself, and then actually
Yep.
milking moo as well. Which is, if anyone, I'm sure a lot of people have never seen this process actually unfolding. They just see the end product, the milk and the cheese and the kefir and all the wonderful dairy products that we get to enjoy thanks to the beautiful cow. But that process of actually milking the cow is really beautiful to see, and it seemed like it was actually pretty laborious too, like fairly labor intensive.
Yeah, it was labor intensive, but it was so cool to bond with her. And after a while of getting to know her and doing this every day, she would just come prancing in from the field in the mornings, come and see me. But yeah, it was labor intensive because, well, she had so much milk and you want to milk out the quarters so she doesn't get mastitis. And then you're dealing with keeping things clean or if she kicks the bucket. She was really good at that. But yeah, I was tired after milking and you will have to do that twice a day and then you can taper down to once a day. There's different things you can do, but yeah, it was a really beautiful process and I do miss it. Like I do miss it especially when it's nice outside and I'm thinking of her cuz I got her around this time last year, but I also realized that she wasn't the perfect fit for my homestead, which that's okay.
Definitely makes sense to have a sort of a feeling out process to see what works best for you. And I'm curious with milking moo and her generating 6 gallons of milk a day. How long would it take to milk 6 gallons? Like what does that look like?
Oh, so let's see. I would be out there for about an hour-ish each time because that would be getting her in from the field, getting her into the stanchion, putting her food in, cleaning her off, and then I'd start milking. So it was around an hour. So having to drive back and then put the milk in the buckets. Yeah, so it was right around there. And then I'd have to come in and then filtering the milk. So all I would do is I had like little milk filters. I'd filter them into separate half-gallon jars or gallon jars. So it was a bit of a process, and that was each time. And that would be if everything went according to plan, especially when she had her calves, like the dynamic changed because she did not want to be separated from her calves. Oftentimes, like with dairy farms, they don't keep their calves because obviously the dairy farm needs the milk. So she got to keep her calves, which I was so happy for her. So, but she did not want to be separated from them. She had super anxiety. So I just start milking her outside of the stanchion and just where she could see her calves. But so it took a lot of time.
That's what I was. Yeah, that's. I guess that makes plenty of sense. Each milk pull is you're only getting that small squirt, so that does take a while to
Yeah.
pick up.
Yeah, it does. And your hand gets tired after a while. Like I really built up like my wrist muscles right in here. Because man, you're just like you gotta take some breaks, but you can't take too long of breaks because then she'll get restless. So it was a really cool experience though. I've never done that before. I wanted to, and I definitely will again sometime.
Awesome, awesome. And the other, so I guess moving on to the rest of the aspects of your homestead system, how do you sort of perceive homesteading, I guess, moving back to the foundation, because you've got all these moving pieces, moving parts. I'm sure there's more of like a way that you're sort of looking out as you manage and get all these things working together.
Yeah, so I would look at it, you're right, it is all these different moving parts and things have different seasons. It's really cool. So, living here for a year, finally being on my homestead for a full year through all the seasons, you see like the animals, they have seasons too. Webs, ebbs and flows, like my chickens, they stopped like slowed down in the winter for laying, and I didn't supplement them with heat or light or anything, just let them do their natural thing. And my bees, like obviously they slowed down in the winter and I ended up losing a hive. I shared that. But so it is this big moving system. And so you kind of just have to like plan, visualize the whole thing. And it's all coming from my needs, right? So I am trying to be self-sufficient and serve what I need or my family needs. And so it's kind of just working through the seasons, I would say, and having that big plan of what to do with it all.
What were some of the more interesting or surprising aspects of your first full seasonal 1 year experience?
Oh, wow. Well, you know, definitely diving in head first. I went over my head with everything homesteading, but I would say that hmm, just kind of learning the lay of the land, that was so important through the seasons of seeing how, well, this may sound silly, but like how the leaves even fall in the fall and how they relate to my garden. And so then that relates to how I can transport the leaves to my garden for mulch, and seeing how like the runs operate for like my chicken run and all my chickens getting out. So I'm trying to think of like surprising things that I've had, but I've just really enjoyed this last year of seasons to just see how the land works, and how my animals also work into the land. Like my chickens, they get out the run all the time. I haven't clipped their wings and they go and like till up the garden, and bees are in the garden. So just seeing how everything works together has been kind of really cool.
That does sound really cool. Watching the concert of nature happening in real time as
Yeah.
it flows through the seasons is really beautiful. Something I miss being here in Southern California, where there's not too many. It's kind of just like all one season,
You
especially
guys are
for,
kind of getting more seasons though. You're getting snow and stuff.
that's true. It's the first true like seasonality that I've experienced in the past 8 years. But growing up, growing up in New England, there was definitely more seasonality where the trees would turn a beautiful, red and pop into these fireworks, while the summers were much more hot and the winters were certainly difficult, cold
Yeah.
and gray, and it was a much more pronounced seasonality. And we had chickens as well, probably a dozen or so, and it was funny to just watch them click around and could
Yeah.
pick them up and put them on your head or just kind of like play with them. But I think at one point, predator, we don't know what, but something came and ate them, and that was the last of the chickens. Do you have to worry about many predators up there?
Yes, so raccoons, coyotes, foxes, skunks, bears. So it's about to be bear season here. So that is another one. I gotta be careful with keeping food out. But I also have like a horde of dogs. So they patrol in the night and they're pretty good at keeping everything at bay.
Is that like are these your dogs, or is it just like a local horde of dogs?
Oh no, they're my dogs. So I have four dogs and then like another dog that I have half like part of the year with a friend who I watch for, but so I just have this big like herd of dogs. And so because it's becoming summer, like getting into summer, things are more active, creatures more active at night. So I've been waking up the past few nights to the dogs just going ballistic at something. I'm just like, oh, well, if it's really, really bad, I'll go out there, but I think they got it.
Nice. It sounds like you're really surrounded by a lot of life. So you've got four, we'll call it 4.5 dogs. How many
Yeah.
chickens do you have?
Let Okay, so I started with 16, lost 7, not to predators, but to my own dogs. Actually, there was I think one predator, but a dog. They kind of went crazy. It was in January. They were completely fine with the chickens last year, and then January, middle of winter, I don't know if they just like
Huh.
we had a nice day. The chickens got out, and I don't know if they forgot about the chickens. Anyway, so they took out some chickens, and then I have 10 chicks in the basement right now that I'm raising. I hatched them this spring. And I also got 4 from the farm store. So I kind of have different ages of chicks clucking in the basement right now.
'Cause that's awesome. Having chicks grow from egg all the way until a baby chicken. That's very cool. What has that sort of process been like, watching that unfold?
Oh, it was so cool. So what I did is I got some eggs from a local farm who does heritage breeds. So heritage breeds are breeds that like our great great grandparents had and they haven't been genetically modified. Like they are just the all natural sort of chicken breed and that's what I want on my farm. And I put them in the incubator. The incubator ran for 21 days and then they started coming out of their eggs and it was so cool to watch. You just go down there and there'd be a little chickie and it was kind of a learning process of when to get the chicks out because when they are wet, you don't want to open up the incubator because then they could catch a cold and die. But then there ended up being, I think, 5 chicks in there and then one hatched, but it didn't have its yolk absorbed and they like went and ate its yolk and that chick died. So it's been this learning process
Huh.
of keeping chicks in the house. And it was really cool to watch that life unfold.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really magical experience, it sounds like. And it's also different from, I think, a popular perception of someone who has maybe never seen these. Like there's really on both sides. We can talk about like the way that the cow came to be milked and had all this extra milk. A lot of people think, there's this idea, oh, you're stealing milk from a cow, and it's like this horrible process of like that. And then the other part with the chickens, like yolk, a lot of people actually think that's a baby chicken, or
Yeah.
but it's a yolk is like a sack of nutrients that the chicken uses to like grow. So it's really amazing you're having this firsthand experience of what this truly is, and you're sharing it out with people, because so many people just have no idea about like any of this and have a completely illusionary perception of what these processes are like.
Yeah, and that makes me think of like how disconnected we are from our food, right? We are so disconnected. I feel like the system has been very good at just I don't know how they made that gap. It's only been a few generations and we are just I mean, our food is here and we're here and it's so crazy to think like you're saying a lot of people don't have that. And so I guess I'm kind of like taking it for granted lately because I'm going through these motions like, "Oh yeah, I'm hatching eggs," but I didn't realize as I was sharing it onto social media, like people really liked that. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, like I guess this isn't a very common thing. I'm just forgetting about that." And I actually stumbled onto a live last night on TikTok. Somebody was just like filming their incubator of eggs hatching and stuff. It had 14,000 viewers. And I was like, "Oh, okay, like this is something that people are intrigued in, like a connection to your food yeah, crazy.
It's so crazy. Yeah, I think a lot of people actually think that food just kind of appears at the grocery store, and like the grocery store is like creates the food. I'm not.
Yes, and it's sad because we're not taught otherwise, we go through the school system and we're never like, at least I wasn't. I never went to a farm to see my food or taught about the food system at all. So yeah, it's sad. A lot of people do think it just appears at the grocery store, and that just gives me so much uh oh gosh, what I say, anxiety thinking about that.
Yeah, it is a little bit unsettling, some aspects of
Yes,
our food system.
unsettling.
Yeah.
But
How
that's why we're here, right? To
it,
help others see that.
100%. Yeah, and you much more than me, you're taking, the leap to really go and do this. I think that it I'm sure that there are a ton of people. I like to imagine sort of all these, potential futures that our nation could sort of go in, and some of them are pretty frightening. I don't like to think about those, but some of them are really beautiful and amazing. Like more people doing what you're doing to take more of a control and connection with the food that they're consuming and creating it and being closer to it. And I think there's this, at least in my mind, and I know in a lot of others, I see it's like sort of unapproachable or like really difficult. I know acquiring land is a big part of it, but it also seems like it's very difficult to like manage chickens and bees and cows. Has it been as challenging as I think that idea, or is it easier than you thought?
So I'm going to say the most challenging part of that is like thinking about it and maybe just the initial like learning curve. And it doesn't take much. And that's why I love bees and chickens because they are so simple. Anybody with just a backyard, anybody with a backyard could have bees and chickens. And you don't even necessarily need a backyard for bees. I know somebody who just has their beehive in their driveway. So I think probably psyching yourself out and thinking that you need land. That's something I want to get across to a lot of people. You don't need a huge chunk of land to homestead. And if you just get one or two chickens for your little backyard, if your HOA allows it, if you live in an HOA, and if you do live in, in an HOA, just move now. But bees, super easy. And that's why I love them. And that's why I'm expanding my chickens and bees this year because I've realized, oh, they're self sufficient, like they do their own thing. I do minimal work with them and I can do all my other stuff.
Very cool. That's great advice for getting started. And maybe one aspect of this that we haven't spoken about yet is the gardening part of it. Are you growing a large garden, looking to expand that? Did you get a lot of different crops this year? How's that part going?
So last year, I didn't get to do as much in the garden as I wanted to because I was so focused on so many other things. I did do a big harvest of garlic, which I eat a lot of garlic. I had raspberries, strawberries. I had fruit trees. They didn't bloom last year. It's kind of an interesting fruit year here last year. So this year though, because I again figuring out my time, I don't have moo that frees up multiple hours of my day. I've already started my seeds and I'm planting out my garden, tons of vegetables for preserving and fruit. Fruit is going to be my main focus. I'm going to be planting a lot of fruit trees because those are so important for me, my next generation, grandkids. So I'm thinking forward to the future and also fruit and berry bushes. So I'm so excited about that.
That's going to be awesome. Have a whole abundant cornucopia of fresh fruit options just out in your property.
Yeah.
Was
With
it?
that though, also too comes bears. So
Mm.
like I gotta predator proof, but that part of why I have like a huge herd of dogs outside, right? But
Yeah, it's that's another part of, I think, being out sort of in a more remote areas, bears or potentially wolves in some other areas, and having these predators. And I guess in the cities we have to worry about predators of a different kind, like other humans as predators. and
oh,
and out in the remote area, it's more of a another animal, another species entirely. There's really no escaping, predators in life. It's just part of being human, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I like that you said there's like other humans, so it's just a different predator in the city. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing that's fun to think about, but it's something that we have to be, something we have to deal with, and we have to
Aware of.
be aware of for sure. Have you thought about the future? You mentioned future generations. I'm sure you've thought about the future. What I mean to say is you've got a grand vision for what you're doing here. You're thinking multi-generationally, and you're planning for your children's and your children's children. I think it's such a beautiful gift to be able to create this beautiful homestead that you're doing. And what does it look like in your mind's eye when you envision the future of your homestead?
Well, when I envision the future, I'm hoping that with my children, when I have children, that I can instill like a love for the land, a love for the community, that they fall in love with where they live. And that comes with falling in love with this self sufficient lifestyle. Like I said earlier, like that lifestyle was only a few generations ago, but all that knowledge has been lost. And so trying to restore these skills to my kids and hoping they fall in love with it. And maybe one day the land can be divided up amongst them. I haven't quite figured out what I would do in that scenario, right? Because once things start to be divided up, then stuff gets sold and then other interests come in. So that I haven't figured out. I'm not sure if you could like make a will that says you cannot sell this, like it stays in the family. I'm not sure if you can. But so thinking of that, hoping and being aware of passing on these skills, hoping my kids, see the value in it and hoping that they restore like this ancestral knowledge, right? Keep it going because it's so valuable. And then hoping that it keeps going on generation. I have a neighbor next to me and they used to own like a huge chunk of land around here, maybe like a couple thousand acres, and now it's only down to like 10 acres because things got sold off and family problems and all that. And so they're slowly trying to buy things back, but once it's gone, it's much more difficult to get back. So hopefully being able to instill that, but of course people are individuals. I don't know what my children's or grandchildren's interests will be, so it's just hoping for the best and they can see um like the fruit garden, the orchard that I want to make for future generations, that they see the value in that.
It's a beautiful vision.
Fingers crossed.
Something fascinating. I was researching just farming, agriculture in general, because there's this whole idea of small farms going away, and the average age of the farmer being like in the 60s or 50s, like very old. And I was kind of wondering why that was. And I think the fascinating thing about farming is that really the most valuable part of it is the land, where they're sort of cultivating all these crops and the soil and the animals, but they're kind of just barely getting by in a way, a lot of them. And then they're essentially sitting on this massive investment of land that really ranges in value based on where it is, but is far and away the most valuable part of what they're doing. So then it's difficult to have someone choose to want to continue that life of kind of barely getting by in a way with the crops that they have, selling them at the market while they're sitting on this massive jackpot in a way that would be the value of the land. But I think you've got something a little bit different and pretty brilliant going on, where you're also creating content which can generate this other income stream. So you have an amazing YouTube channel that I see is going to just really continue growing over time to be a successful one based on what you're doing now, because it's pretty mind blowing. And then also you're streaming on Twitch as well. Is that sort of sum it up?
Yeah, so that does sum it up. So I've been streaming on Twitch for 8 years now. And it's way different. So I do gaming there. That was where it all started. And amazing. So there's just some really amazing people that I have this super cool community over there. And I started this homestead about a year and a half ago with the YouTube and the content. But going back to what you're saying about farmers being old and barely getting by, absolutely, yes, and I see it. And I was wondering that same thing. And what's so interesting is I went and talked to my neighbor. They're older and they farmed around here. So this used to be huge dairy land. Everybody had the dairy. And I remember driving around and all these places are just broken down. Nobody does a dairy anymore. And I was like, why is this? And so I was over with my neighbor before I got my cow because they were showing me like how to, milk a cow and do all this. And I was talking to them about the dairy industry like collapsing, and they said it was because the government came in and was like, hey, we're going to start giving incentives. And so people ended up like taking these incentives, and then I forget exactly what it was, but they ended up selling their herd, and it just collapsed the whole dairy industry. And instead of the dairy industry relying on these small farms, it went like mass corporation. So it was kind of interesting to me, like, oh, the government came in and collapsed all these small farms. And it's sad to think about, but it's also something to be aware of, handouts and that sort of thing, especially in farming. Kind of an interesting thing going on with farmland right now. But like you touched on, we have the internet. So I think there could be a huge revival on small farms because people have access to cameras. They have infinite amounts of content that they could create on their land. People just need to realize that.
Absolutely. And that's a fascinating point to make, how the government has really been shifting small farms over into big businesses and large corporations. And I think we're of a generation where we're sort of feeling the consequences of that. I think it was probably a beneficial thing for the nation for a long time to, for some of the nation. And now it's kind of needing to swing back in the other direction. And you're a big part of that sort of swing back in the other direction. People who are realizing, oh, hold on, it's better on the over here now. So we're gonna change our ways and see what comes of this. Most young people, aren't really, you're like really sharp and up to speed on all this. Like you're out doing the thing. A lot of people are just like really lost with their life, really at any age. But just the fact that you are, doing this at a young age and really making it happen it's just so impressive and cool. And I think setting a really powerful example for others, regardless of age. I think age doesn't have to, really doesn't play that big of a factor, but I think it's something a lot of people are curious about. That's amazing to see. I guess what I'm getting at is like this curiosity around like, have you always been sort of interested in this in the back of your head, or was it really just like that 2020 sent you on this like massive catalyst to try and dig deeper? Was it kind of ruminating before that?
So it definitely was ruminating before that. So I moved down to California. Oh, so I grew up in more of like a rural area, moved around rural parts, and man, I did not have a connection with the food or the land. My family didn't farm, so I just didn't have like this connection at all. So I was dreaming of the city, right? I was like, oh man, I got to go to LA. I want to go to California, live that lifestyle. I went, and then I went on a hike down there one day. And I remember the parking lot was full of RVs, and you couldn't even go on the trail because there's so many people. And I remember I went home and I actually cried. And I was like, wow, I really miss like this rural living that I had. So that was like kind of this change of thinking like, wow, the land and the animals and everything were really important to me. And I never realized it growing up. So I moved back, and then I became more interested. I wanted to have my own like piece of land one day. And then I started building food storage when I was in university because I mean, the way of the world is kind of shaky. And then when 2020 happened, that's when I was like, all right, I need to be self sufficient. This is not going to work. Our system's not reliable. So I need to get those systems in place for myself. And that's when I started to do more gardening and look into chickens, but I couldn't have chickens or bees at the time due to my HOA. And I just patiently awaited for an opportunity to arise, and it did.
Amazing. Amazing. Do you miss anything about more urban or population dense living, or is it 100% a win where you're at now?
I do miss, now I'm trying to think, what do I miss? Um, well, I loved the weather down in California because it was so temperate and it was like constant throughout the year. That was really wonderful. And the summers were never too incredibly hot. So I do miss the weather, right? Especially as I'm coming out of this really difficult winter and like thinking of California weather, but you guys are kind of like all over the place right now, so I don't know. But sometimes being close in proximity to some of my favorite stores, um, to be able to go and get maybe some fresh ingredients or something. That's really the only thing I could think. But now I'm like, I have everything. I never go to the store anyways, but maybe something like that on occasion.
That's what
Besides
I would.
that, like,
Yeah. I guess that's what I would imagine is just like being able to, walk a couple of blocks to the store or drive,
mm,
quickly as opposed to having to drive a little bit longer, more of a road trip to kind of get some of the things that you want or need. But I think that's another thing about the internet is I'm sure you have deliveries where you are to order things that you need.
yeah, so I have deliveries, and you're right. It is a road trip if I want to go into town to get something, and it doesn't have the same like par of stores as the city does, right? And I feel like things are a bit more expensive depending on the store. So that is a bit of a trade. Whereas I used to be able to just drive down the block, go to my favorite store, get everything I needed. But now I do like as your standard, which I order online and get organic food, and it's delivered to an area near me, like in my community. And there's so many benefits with that. The as your standard is because you get to meet other people who are like minded in the community as you, and you can do it anywhere in the cities, wherever. But that's been something that's been like a saving grace for me is if I miss those fresh ingredients from the store, I can get them online, like you were saying, but also meet people. I've met some really cool people who are also ordering bulk ingredients from this online organic store.
Amazing. And then you touched on another interesting aspect of this which would be something along the lines of community. So I think moving out to a more remote location, people may think, oh, it could be lonely out there. My neighbor's really far away. What is it like in terms of the neighborhood or the community that you've been able to connect with out there?
Well, I feel like I've quickly discovered everybody seems to be pretty like minded. They like their privacy. That's probably why they moved out here. But they're very community driven. Like my neighbors, they would be there for me if I ever needed anything. And the community that I'm talking about, like I've met at my Azure drops, it's other people who are building a food storage because you see what they're ordering and then you talk about different ingredients and then you learn what they're gardening or what animals they're raising. And so it's kind of cool you're like swapping these skills, but that also happens with my neighbors. But there's also, drama always comes with neighbors, I feel like. And even if you live in the city, when I lived, right next to somebody versus somebody being like a half a mile away from me, there's still like this interesting dynamic with people. But I've also learned because the remoteness, I'm not sure what exactly I would have to do. My neighbors are like all preppers. Like they are very prepared. I have one very prepper neighbor who's like tied into the whole state and has um like access to visuals of the water and the railroads and the roads and so it's kind of cool. It's this really I feel like these people who have like we were talking about that pendulum, like they swung back and they were like, okay, this is way better than where we've been for the past few generations, and they're you know moving remote.
Yeah, that's beautiful to think that you've got a community of like-minded people. Everyone has their privacy, their space, they've got their thing going on, and then they can all be connected. And if something ever did happen, God forbid, but if it did, you'd all be able to work together and sort of share resources and communicate with all that. And really, it's the aspect of self-sufficiency that you have. It's almost really amplified by the self-sufficiency of everyone in the community because you can all work together and be this sort of hive in a way, a collective.
Oh yeah, I like that you said it's amplified because yes, so what I do, like the bees and the chickens, somebody else does beef and we're able to trade those resources if it ever came down to like bartering. I already barter with my neighbors. So it's just cool to think that if something ever came down, like we have each other's backs, like we're our own community. And I feel like that hive would amplify with the other hives around us because it's like these little mini communities of neighbors that they all know each other. So, yeah, I feel really safe here.
That is super cool. That's super cool. That reminds me, I believe in one of your videos, your neighbor's cow came and was like eating some of your was like eating the grass or something? Does that happen often?
It doesn't happen too often. I remember even Moo got out once because she saw the cows down the way. She went all the way down the road. I look out the window and she's going up somebody's driveway. So I have gotten my whole place fenced now, so that won't happen, but everybody's really good if it does happen.
Cows seem really nice. They just seem like kind of big, gentle dogs that are just sort of like walking around minding their own business.
Yes, so there are different breeds. So like the Jersey that I had, sweet temperament. You could just go and be with her. She's not reckless or messy or destructive. Amazing. But there's also Angus cows, which are where, the beef comes from. Um, and they're very destructive. And I would not want to be, and especially bulls too, even if it was a Jersey bull, I wouldn't want to really be in the field with them because they can be unpredictable. And it's also like cleanliness too. Like I feel like different cows carry different levels of cleanliness. So it's just kind of interesting. There's this whole like rainbow of cows and animals that have all these unique aspects. And last year I had a herd of Angus cows pasturing in my backfield and they got out and they were so destructive. They came to my garden, they took down some trees, bushes, stomped through the garden. I'm surprised they didn't take out my beehives, but Moo, she was out free ranging. She was with my bees and in my garden, but she was just elegant.
Wow, dang! I So you had like a stampede of Angus cows come through and just destroy your trees and
It
bushes.
really was, though.
Wow.
Yeah, it really was. I just, wow, woke up to them. They completely destroyed everything of Moo's, all of her fencing. They took it all out. So they must have just stampeded through it. They ate all of her mineral, tipped over stuff in her bar. It was quite the disaster when I woke up, and I was a little upset that day. But it's these new homestead things you're learning. Like, okay, I don't know if I want to really have a herd of Angus cows out here, or got to make sure that their fence is really amplified, really electrified.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's a great lesson to learn early on before you have your whole fruit orchard set up. It would have been really bad if you had all that set up.
Oh, that would have been so bad. If I would have had, like, if I would have been doing my gardening as much as I'm going to be doing it this year, it would have been completely destroyed. Like, they just ravaged the whole thing.
Yeah. I guess chickens are somewhat of a similar way, but they're so much smaller. They can't do as much damage.
Yeah, that's true. And what's so beautiful is they go and till up my garden. So they'll go and till it. I do have to put up barriers around my garden boxes so they don't like go till up my plants when I want them to grow. But at the end of the season, you let them in there and they go and fertilize it for you and they aerate the soil. Like chickens are so amazing. They're like little compost bins. And that's why I think it's so valuable for everybody to have chickens if possible because the food scraps that you're just throwing in the garbage, they go to chickens and then they compost your garden. It's just this magnificent, beautiful way of life of how I think it was intended to be. And we're relearning how it should have been, but the systems kind of disrupted that. It disrupted our learning. So it is really cool to return to that.
It is. And they gift you with eggs on top of that. Are you like overwhelmed with eggs, or do you have sort of a right amount or not enough, or what's that like?
So right now I'm getting about, let's see, I think yesterday I got 8 eggs a day, so I'm back up to 8 eggs. But that I feel like there's never something as too much eggs because what I do is I water glass the eggs and that preserves, like shelf preserves eggs for up to 2 years. So when I have an abundance of eggs, I water glass them. So it's just water and lime, pickling lime, and then you just put the eggs in there and then put them on my shelf, and then that's what I eat in the winter. So it's cool. I have like summer pastured eggs to have a nutrient dense meal or food in the winter. So I don't feel like I'm ever overwhelmed. And I also share with my dogs. They love the eggs. So it's kind of a cool thing because they supplement feed for me.
It's very cool. Yeah. And I'm actually not familiar with water glassing eggs. Is that just a whole raw egg in the jar with the water and the lime, or is it like hard boiled first?
Oh, no. So you just get a clean egg. So you can't do it with store-bought. So store-bought washes the eggs and sometimes they put chemicals on the eggs. You need clean farm fresh eggs. And a lot of people always ask me, how do you have clean eggs? Well, I feel like you just have a clean area for them to lay eggs so there's not poop all over the eggs. Like, and so you just have a clean farm fresh egg, like no debris on it. You can maybe take maybe you can take a microfiber cloth and wipe off any debris lightly, and then you fill up like a gallon jar with water and pickling lime. So it is 1 quart of water to 2 tablespoons pickling lime. So you fill it up, and then you just stack raw eggs in there, and it preserves them. So a lot of people ask what the egg will look like after it's been in the pickling lime for a while. And sometimes the egg will just, or the yolk will look a bit more runny, but that's it. Like that is what I ate through the winter. And that was like 8-month-old eggs that I was eating, and they just sat on the shelf. Tasted great. I never got sick, and they looked beautiful. So it is such a neat way to preserve. And I feel like a lot of people aren't familiar with that, but that's how, our great grandparents preserved eggs when they had an abundance.
Wow, that's amazing. Huh. Yeah, definitely not something that I'd even heard of before this conversation. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So if you ever want to preserve some eggs, there you go.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so here's another question that I'm curious about that's coming to mind. A little bit of I guess a left turn, but if you think about now that you no longer have moo, and are you considering getting other animals, more animals like goats or sheep or camels or anything?
So, oh man, I feel so guilty saying this, but sometimes my heart is like, just get another dairy cow. But obviously, I know I wouldn't. I have considered goats. Goats would need fencing. They absolutely need fencing because they're such escape artists. And it's just a matter if I want to go and do the fencing and do that time commitment. So I'm very careful with my time because I am doing all this content, right? And I'm also doing streaming on Twitch, so I gotta be careful in that aspect. But goats would be amazing for goat milk. But I'm also in figuring out what I want to bring to my homestead, my farm, is what is the cost going to be, and what could I get it if I sourced it from somewhere else. So I'm very much like I love supporting local, and so for example, if I got goats, considering the time, how much that would cost in terms of my time, the feed, the care, random vet expenses, versus if I just went and bought goat milk from somebody down the road. Usually it turns out for me that it's more beneficial for my time and cost effective to just buy out just because of the time consumption, unless I wanted to or was able to turn it into like a goat milk production and I was selling goat milk and that was my main thing.
Uh, that's a really smart way to think about it.
So no.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, not at the moment. Um I don't even know what animal I would bring next. I'm really obsessed right now with bees, like bees and chickens. That's why I'm doing more chickens and bees because they are so cool. And honey is such an easy thing to sell, like raw honey. And my time commitment to bees is not much at all versus the return that you get for selling a jar of raw honey would be more than the time commitment and versus okay, would be more okay. How do I explain that? Let's see. Would be more okay. I gotta go back and rethink that because I'm like, how do I say this? Basically, what I'm saying is the benefit of having bees and selling bees with my time and everything is a bigger benefit than my time commitment to a dairy cow and how much I could sell the milk for, if
Mm,
that makes sense.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a much more valuable investment of your time. It's a much more
Yes.
efficient aspect of your homesteading. Yeah, and bees are really amazing insects or creatures, beings, little the hive and that I don't know. I know from a product standpoint, there's, royal jelly and propolis, and then there's the raw honey, and there's even the actual maybe you can think
Pollen?
the pollen, and then also like the actual hive itself, right? The beeswax.
Oh, yeah, the honeycomb?
Yes, the honeycomb.
Is that what
Yeah,
you're talking? Yep, comb.
yeah. So there's like all that,
Yeah,
and
and the
also
beeswax.
and beeswax. So that's an
Yep.
amazing. It's amazing that this one simple, which who's also so essential with the is going to be helpful with the garden that you're making, can work through this whole harmonious system that you're cultivating. And I think recently you had a bit of a problem with your beehives. Is that?
Yes. So in the fall, they got attacked. And yeah, it's crazy. My bees, in the fall, they are foraging for food. And so I had some bees coming in, like foreign bees or some hive around miles radius around, coming in and stealing food from my hive. So I had to cover them. So that was rough because I'm about to go into winter. Winter is so hard on bees. So I was just like praying, hoping that my bees were going to be okay. And one week, one hive was stronger than the other. And so I went into winter with that and I did the most prep that I could. And I actually did a step further than what is generally recommended. So what's recommended for prepping beehives is you wrap them in like a little insulator. But I took like roofing wrap. I put like just like a thick paper around them and then put the insulator. But then I got a top box that had a almost like a pillow filled with like another insulator, but for moisture, because moisture is what's going to kill your bees in the winter. So, and I put extra food in there. So, say they ran out of food, they had a little fondant cake to go and eat. And I'm so happy I did that because I had one hive die and they were the weaker hive. And I'm super, super, super bummed about that. But one hive, the other hive survived. And I actually propped open the top of their hive last week and I saw that they found their fondant, which tells me that if they didn't have that fondant, they would have died. And the little bag of like moisture absorbing that I had in there, this little moisture absorption bag, it was so moist. So that saved all that moisture from going into the hive. So I'm learning these things. I lost a hive because maybe they weren't strong enough, they didn't find the fondant, but it's these things in the first year. Like now I know how to hopefully keep bees alive through the winter. So yeah, really cool. Love my bees.
It is really cool. And yeah, these lessons, I guess it seems like you've had quite an amazing journey this first year, despite a few lessons along the way. But I mean, I guess that's what you expect with the first time homesteader going through your first year. It's really an incredible story and experience that you're having. And I think the bees are such a beautiful sort of nexus point of the story that you're describing, the way that they kind of work together and generate this amazing honey as a result of their relationship with the land and with each other. What do you love about the bees?
Oh, I just love to go out there. Well, what you said about how they just work together with nature and they bring it and turn it into a product, honey and propolis, and but I love just going out there and hanging out with them. And I post videos of the bees crawling on me. And I know it gives people like, oh, that's so dangerous or scary. But bees, at least my kind, I have carniolans, they're so peaceful. I don't know how to explain it, but they just have this peace. Like they are just busy doing their thing. And it's a lesson to me because they're not so much worried about what's going on in the world. Like they are just doing what they need to be doing, what they were sent here to do. So I think about that and apply that to my life. I just feel like I have so many lessons that I learned from my animals. And that's why I'm expanding my bees because I want to have more of them. I want to surround myself with more of that peace on my homestead.
I have this idea about bees where if you're afraid of them, they can kind of sense your fear, and then they are more likely to sting you if you're afraid. But if you are thinking about how much you love them, and I always consciously think about how much I love bees and all the things they do when they're around me, and they never sting me. So that's my idea about it.
That's true. And supposedly, when you are fearful, you release a pheromone that they sense, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna come and get you." But also too, that reminds me of like bananas. You never want to eat bananas and go out to your beehives because that is their like swarm smell. So they'll want to swarm you. But yeah, absolutely. Just like having those, good thoughts and vibes and not stress yourself out around bees. I when I tend to them, I never really wear my bee suit. I just go out there, and I feel like maybe this is a little crazy, but I feel like they know, like, hey, like this is my person. Maybe not. I don't know.
I believe that 100%. Yeah, the whole
Yeah.
natural world, it's so much more alive and conscious than a lot of people really think. And I'm not even really going like full hippie mode, like, but it's just true on an objective level. If you have any interaction with a dog or a bee, or even, I think probably animal, maybe I've heard even people say that sharks, are more likely to bite you if you're afraid of them versus if you're giving them loving vibrations, whatever that. If you can do that with a
No,
shark.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I believe that. And like just like you have all those plants around you too. I have house plants. And I'll go and talk to him in the morning, and I tell him, "You're so beautiful, and I'm trying to keep you alive. Like, please, I'm trying to do what I can." So I like that you said it's just like this connection, and that's kind of the root of everything that I'm doing here. Is like I want to connect back to the environment, and create that connection our ancestors had.
It's really beautiful thing that you are doing with that connection that is at the root of everything that you are doing on a day-to-day basis and sharing out into the world for other people to see. And I've really appreciated you sharing that journey and coming on to this podcast to make this episode with me. And it's been a fantastic conversation that I've really enjoyed. Is there any sort of last sentiment that you'd like to share with everybody listening?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I have had a lot of fun discussing, and I would have liked to hear more too about you. So, but I just want everybody to know that you don't need a ton of land to homestead. You just need to start with where you're at. And like we talked about, I feel like it is so achievable. It is incredibly I wouldn't say easy, but it's doable. Everything is figure outable and everything is doable, and you just got to start with where you're at. Don't keep thinking you got to have X, Y, or Z to start homesteading or to start keeping chickens. Like, just do it.
Beautiful. Gubba, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.